Is this angle right? There's a box of Girl Scout cookies behind me. That's so embarrassing. Let's meet at the library. Okay. Hi everyone, it's Julia and welcome to my channel, Shakespeare and Such. So, it's been a little while since I posted a video and I'm sorry, but it's mainly just because I haven't had time to film, so, you know, I didn't have any content to post, so I couldn't do it. I know I haven't done an April wrap-up. I did film that, but I wasn't really feeling it, so either I'm going to try to edit that so I like it better, or I might do a combo April-May wrap-up. So you'll see what I choose there. But in the meantime, I actually had an afternoon to myself and I thought, let's talk about a recent read that I just struggled with so hard. And that is the infamous Acotar, Thorns and Roses by Sarah J. Maas. This has no dust jacket because it's being lent to me. God bless you, Clara. Yeah, I'm glad I didn't have to spend my own money on this book. Let's talk about this book. I could make, a beautiful rant for you, but I already posted a very, very thorough Goodreads review. I mean, it is probably the longest, saltiest Goodreads review I've ever written. I thought that The Wrath and the Dawn would forever be my longest review. Acotar topped it. And also, let's be real. This is not a hot take. A lot of people have issues with this book. Even people who like and love this series have issues with this book. So, I want to add something new to the conversation. And so I'm going to be talking about the top 5 worst things that I don't think I've heard anyone else talk about in Acotar. Let's do it. The first one is very short and very simple. Feyre. Not the character. She's got enough flaws as a whole being, but just her name. You chose to write a book about Fae, and you named your main character Feyre? Why? The word fae and fairies is used so much in this book that why would you want your main character to have a name that's basically pronounced like the most used word in this book? I don't understand that, and I never will. It's worse than when you have 2 main characters that both start with the same letter. I hate that. But this is like writing a book about dogs and your main character being named Dogathan. It's just stupid. I don't know, I hate that. Number 2, the high fae versus the other fae. This one makes me uncomfortable. I'm going to be pretty frank. I don't understand. I'm going to try to explain this for people who haven't read the series. Essentially, in the Fae world, well, this is technically only in Prythian, but I guess there are more than one fairy kingdom. Kind of confused about that concept also. That's not why we're here. There are the High Fae, which are beautiful, mainly human-esque with pointy ears and wings and crap, but they're just very, very attractive, slightly different humans. There are also other kinds of fae, like the Surreal and the Bogey and the Naga. I can't believe I just remembered all those names correctly. I think even the pronunciation, wow, I have a remarkable memory for things I don't care about, I guess. But those things are not very human-like. From what I recall, actually, let's just look it up. So, for example, the Naga are covered in dark scales. They're a horrendous combination of serpentine features and male humanoid bodies with powerful arms that end in polished black, flesh-shredding talons. So, a little less human, a little more creepy. And yet, all these things are still considered fae. And it just felt vaguely racist to have high fae and just do they call them low fae or just various other fae. Like, they're all the same species, right? Because aren't fae just fae the way that humans are humans? And yet there's all these different types, and it's like, these are the beautiful ones. These ones are good, and like these ones get to be like high lords and ladies and like have balls and stuff. And these ones are freaking monsters that will haunt your nightmares and yeah, probably eat you alive. So they're very different, but they're all fae. It just, I don't know, the classification seemed weird. And it's like, this is a fantasy world, so why couldn't you just say, like, yeah, we're all fae, and the bogey, ooh, you don't mess with that. They're like a total scary creature thing. Like, it's a fantasy world. Call it a creature that isn't fae. I don't get it. Point 3 is very related to that last point, and it is the cauldron. What is it? Is it a literal cauldron? Is it a figurative cauldron? Is it a metaphorical cauldron? Is it a religious thing, or is it just a thing? Like, is it a word? Because they talk about it a lot, and yet they never explain it, which is very weird in a book that just gets info dumps all over the place. We never really want to talk about the cauldron. In fact, I think I'm going to go back and look at the chapter where we first hear about the cauldron. Okay, I definitely think I was just bored during this part, but here's what the book actually tells us about the cauldron. The story of Prythian. It began with a cauldron, a mighty black cauldron held by glowing, slender female hands in a starry, endless night. Those hands tipped it over, golden, sparkling liquid pouring out over the lip. No, not sparkling, but effervescent, with small symbols, perhaps of some ancient fairy language. Whatever was written there, whatever it was, the contents of the cauldron were dumped into the void below, pooling on the earth to form our world. The map spanned the eternity of our world, not just the land on which we stood, but also the seas and the larger continents beyond. Blah, blah, blah. So my question is the cauldron fairy mythology? Is like the cauldron their sort of god figure? Because if so, or is it the hands? Whoever's holding the hands, is that the godlike figure who in the cauldron is like their thing? I don't know, and I don't understand it. Because they use it within their language, so that could mean it's, you know, very cultural. I mean, it's obviously a part of the fairy culture, but then is it religious? Because it's talking about the formation of the world, but it's also like, wouldn't it be blasphemous then? Because they're always saying like, by the cauldron and whatever cauldron, like they just talk about it a lot. So, you know, like super religious people in our world are like, if you say, oh my God, some people are like, don't speak his name in vain. So like, is that what they're doing? Or is it not the same thing? But also, the fairy characters in this story use the word hell. So is that to imply that that's just a part of like human culture that is still remaining in their world? Or does their religious system have like the cauldron created us and hell is where you go, you know, when you die if you suck, just like in various religions. But if so, it just seems weird that they'd be like a combo. I don't know. I always have issues with this. If you use the word hell in a fantasy setting, I'm going to like snap to attention right away because I need an explanation. Do they believe in hell? Or is that just a word? Because it can't be a word without context. Like it implies that they know what hell is. If you tell someone to go to hell, like you're not being like, go to a party, it means you don't like them. So words do not exist in a void, okay? You have to be careful about the ones that you choose. Next point, please. My fourth point is not really a specific point, but it just is interesting to me because she being Sarah J. Maas, really seemed in the beginning to be going ham down this Beauty and the Beast road, and I was kind of here for it. I was like, you know what? There's actually a lot here that does constitute this retelling, and like respect for that. I'll give it to you. But it's like, who Who would ever think about like a classic fairy tale or Disney movie that they love and be like, do you know what would make this better? More abuse. Yes, that's right. More sexual assault. That's what we need. And this story will be better. Because that's what we got here. Fire Knight, what a fright. Resand, I'm gonna rescind. All right, time for my fifth and final point of discussion in this video. This will likely be the subject that I talk about the longest because it is the nerdiest, but it's also one of the ones that bothers me the most. And gosh darn it, I'm gonna take my time talking about this issue. And that is the fact that Sarah J. Maas doesn't understand how learning to read works. Feyre is illiterate, but also why, how, and it doesn't make sense every time she learns or she tries to learn how to read. It just doesn't make sense. Exhibit A. It's kind of hard to verify this within text, but within the first book, it is told that Feyre's mom died a few years after like their wealth began to disappear, and that they lived in the village for years. And Feyre, I believe, is 18 in this book, so I mean, years is a relative term, but it implies like, you know, like less than a decade, right? I had really thought that Feyre had moved when she was 11, but the wiki said 8. Anyways, point being, these are ages above the age of which it is commonly taught how to read. 5-year-olds, 6-year-olds learn how to read. Feyre should not be completely illiterate because she was in a very wealthy household in her youth. Like, what kind of well-to-do parents would not be like, oh yes, and these are our daughters, and they're reading this fine literature of blah, 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 and these are all their accomplishments. Like, that's basic being a parent, is like setting your child up for success. And I'm pretty sure no matter what their financial woes or their parents' actual personalities, they'd want their daughters to know how to read. It just seems like she would have started that process already. And I get that, you know, things get rusty when you don't practice them, and Feyre spent years hunting and occasionally painting instead of, you know, like sitting down with a good book. But I don't think reading is a like use it or lose it kind of thing. I think it's more of a riding a bike you never really forget kind of thing. Now let's go into specifically what Feyre looks like when she is trying to read. I know the exact page I'm looking for because I reread it like 5 times. So this is the same example that I talked about in my written Goodreads review, but this is one section where Feyre is practicing trying to read something. So my finger traced a line of text and I whispered the words. She grabbed her shoe, standing from her pose. I sat back in my chair and pressed the heels of my palms into my eyes. There's like a lot wrong with that. And it seems like it's just someone like stammering over their words trying to read, but as someone who teaches people to read, both at work and after work, and like for years because that's what I studied in school, teaching people to read, it's not really how it works. I mean, with any language, you first have like your symbols, right? In our case of the English language, it's our letters. You got to learn them. You have to know what they are and know the sounds that they make. So you have alphabetic so you have your alphabetic knowledge and your phonemic awareness. Once you know your letter sounds, you can start coming up with some words. The first thing you learn to read, other than individual letter words like A and I, are sight words. Sight words are often words that you could sound out, but they're words that you see all the time. The, that, we, you, can, things that you just see a lot all the time in every text. Basic, like 2 to 5, 4 or 5 letter words. Okay, those are your sight words. And I get that this is like a fantasy, maybe historical type setting. You know, it's not like she was going to kindergarten and learning these things, but still, that's like the basic building blocks of your reading skills. Once you know letter sounds and basic words, you can start sounding things out. That's where you literally take the letters and go, you know, oh, here, she is a good example. She is a sight word because if you try to do sounding it out, you're going to go s, or e. You're not really going to get it. So you do also have to know your blends and your digraphs and your diphthongs. My linguistics people, are you with me? Okay, great. Anyways, so she grabbed her shoes. I take issue with this. Grabbed, I can kind of get behind. I can sort of see that you might do grab and then bed, but also, since it's a double B, it seems like she wouldn't. I'm just being nitpicky, but that's true. But then we get to the word shoe. Shoe is a 4-letter word spelled S-H-O-U. Unless Feyre just remembers a handful of words and one of them is specifically shoe, how on God's green earth did she not struggle with that? There's nothing in that written word to indicate that you should pronounce it with a long U sound. It's an O and an E. Like, I would have understand if she said show or even showy. Shoe, like Feyre had to have known that word, which just boggles my mind that she's like, I'm illiterate, but man, can I read the word shoe. That's one I know. I don't get it. This is the only example from the book that I can remember her actually like trying to read, other than like the vague second challenge in which we don't even get to read what she was reading. It's just like, there were words and I couldn't read them. Or like that time she wrote down the list of words and then later Tamlin turned them into dirty limericks. No comment. I mean, that part was like a little bit cute, but also what? Yeah, so it's hard to delve more into this because we were only given half a sentence to work with, but I do maintain that she just doesn't get it. And also, it seems like there wasn't much of a point to making Feyre illiterate because, one, there really wasn't much like within Tamlin's house that she could have read that would have helped her. 2, the second challenge was not supposed to be about reading. It was supposed to be about whatever the question was. And for some reason, Amarantha didn't know Feyre couldn't read. So that was pointless. And then 3, she gave her the riddle verbally as well, which makes no sense because I know Feyre's an idiot and she couldn't figure it out, which is fine. But you know, it just would have been way more hilarious for her to have a riddle that she knew would be the answer to her freedom, and for her to just be like just not being able to read it. I'm sorry, why am I the villain in this story? I'm like mocking her. It is fine. I mean, it's not fine to be illiterate. You should try to learn to read. It's like really good for your life and for the world. But I mean, I'm not judging anyone who can't read. Obviously, there are tons of different circumstances in the world, and just because you cannot read doesn't mean that you are a stupid person. Feyre is just illiterate and also stupid. So just want to clarify there's a huge difference there. But Sarah J. Maas doesn't understand how reading works. I digress. Okay, guys, let's hold it up one more time. Those were the top 5 worst things in Acotar that no one talks about that I just really wanted to talk about. I know that the vast majority of BookTube has already read this book probably the whole series, and that I am way behind on the bandwagon. I mean, I'm not even on the bandwagon. I'm like running behind the bandwagon saying, just leave me here for the love of God. Don't turn around and pick me up. Don't do it. But hopefully we can discuss. I would love to know if any of these things bothered you when you read this book, or if all the poor opinions of this book have kept you from reading it, because that's why it took me forever to read it, and I still don't know why I did. Actually, I do know why I did. A Instagram story poll told me I should, so I did. And I would also love to talk about anything else wrong with this book, because Lord knows we could talk just all day about the writing style, the characters, the scene in which Rhysand just licks a tear off of Feyre's cheek. Oh my god, this book. Anyways, thank you all so much for watching. Can't wait to read all your comments down below. Be sure to check the down bar as well for all my social media links. I'd love to chat with you on Goodreads or Instagram or Twitter or Bookaxe. What is Bookaxe? I'm going to make a video about it because I want more people to use it with me. It's great. Actually, just check my link and you'll figure it out. But yeah, this was this. You'll see more of me soon. Bye!